Tomorrow's the deadline to register to vote in January Senate runoffs, and the 11 Alive viewer asked us what steps are actually being taken to verify where Georgia voters actually live in our state. Liza Lucas verifies.
Voting in Georgia when you are not a resident of Georgia is a felony.
A warning from Georgia's Secretary of State ahead of the Senate runoff. And some of you want to know how officials make sure newly registered voters are legitimate. Let's verify with sources including the 2002 Help America Vote Act, the official code of Georgia, Georgia's Secretary of State's office, and 11 Alive's legal analyst, Paige Pate. To start, the Help America Vote Act requires states verify information on a new voter's application before they're added to the voter roll. In Georgia, state law is clear. Voters must be a resident of Georgia and of the county or municipality where they plan to vote. Let's break it down further. Voter registration is a county function, so Georgia counties issue precinct cards after reviewing and processing applications. And there are multiple ways to register. However, Georgia's Secretary of State's office says most people are using the new option to register when renewing or applying for their driver's license. Because of the Real ID requirements to get a license, these applicants provide proof of ID like a passport, plus their Social Security card and 2 documents showing Georgia residency. According to Georgia law, completed voter applications go to the county, where ID and residency requirements are reviewed. Officials can also challenge an application and hold a hearing if needed.
They would look at, did they get a new driver's license? Did they sign a lease or buy a new house here? Are they looking for work? Do they have a new job? That's going to be a pretty involved process, but I think that's how the Secretary of State's office would determine the true intent of someone who moved to Georgia in time to vote in the runoff.
With these sources, we can verify Dalton's question. It's true that federal and Georgia law requires new voters be verified before they're allowed to vote. That includes checking residency. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger warns that false registration can be punishable with up to 10 years in prison and/or up to a $100,000 fine. Have a question or claim for us to verify? Send us an email at verify@11alive.com.